Hello and welcome to Studio Sessions, the Madam House Pottery podcast. I'm your host, Will Donovan, and on this show, we interview some of the ceramic community's most brilliant minds and talented artists. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found your way, and I'm excited to dig into this conversation. Today, we're talking with Nikolai Busch. He's the true innovator behind Buschcraft Tools and also the former engineer and product designer for Diamond Core. And I'm excited to dig in this conversation because with the launch of his new tools, he's really taken the ceramic world by storm. And I'm excited to dive into his story today as we begin following Nikolai and his family's journey as they begin blending engineering with ceramics to help serve potters across the world. First, with tools such as Diamond Core, and now onto his new venture at Buschcraft Tools. It's a story of passion and a lot of risk-taking in the art of making something that's really something truly unique. Plus, I think there's a few gold nuggets that Nikolai shares that I hope you'll be able to take into your studio or creative practice and glean some really valuable wisdom from it. So without any further ado, let's dig into it today and hear how Nikolai's vision came to life. Nikolai, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm excited to dig into the story behind Buschcraft and how you came really from your origins. And I'm excited to hear you tell us about it to where you are today. Just to catch the viewer or the listener up to speed, can you share the story about, just in brief, how you came to where Buschcraft is today?
So I heard a term not that long ago, like it took my whole life to get here, which is sort of true to a lot, where it's like it really, like there's a lot of little steps along the way. But Buschcraft is pretty new, so it really started last September, like end of August, September is really when it started. And a lot of what led up to that was a lifetime of pottery, like a passion for pottery, combined with a professional career of product development, design, and manufacturing, and sort of like this engineering side. And I've spent a lot of years on that side of it while always pursuing the passion project of pottery. And they sort of came together, about 6-7 years ago. And through my work at Diamond Core and on, to Buschcraft now. And so it's been like a long time in progress, and I'm using things from a long time ago to kind of get here.
I was surprised to go back through your account and realize that Buschcraft started like in September. I remember having seen your posts, and already it feels like I've been familiar with the name Buschcraft. And I don't know why, but in my head, it feels like it's been a long time. And when I went back recently, just kind of looking back through some of your old posts, I was like, his first announcement, I think, was like in October of like this tool is available. And I was shocked then to remember that you were presenting it in Sika, and just to realize that this time frame has happened really relatively quickly. I was really impressed by how quick you started and how fast you've already been able to grow to where you are now, at least from the outside looking in.
Yeah, it's been really fast. And it's even crazy here when we think about it. We know all the steps, like we know kind of what we did, but it still feels a little unreal to have seen this much progress over this short amount of time. But really that comes from just trying to, I felt like I couldn't really mess around. Like if I was going to do this, I had to do it the best possible way I could think of. It's kind of like going all in, and things started like really up in September. The timeline, like at the end of the summer to before I had tools, was really interesting because I knew that NCECA was coming up. We knew, as in my wife and I, we knew we had like ClayCon in January. We knew we had NCECA in March. And these were really big events that are really important to the industry and to tool companies and to brands. And so if we were going to do this, we had to go to NCECA. Like it was a requirement. And so it was kind of crazy, but like we ended up booking NCECA. We ended up making these plans, getting the booths, like planning all this before we even had a finished product ready to sell, which is really scary. And like, I don't recommend it. It's not really the best way to go about it, but it was necessary given the timeline that we had and the situation that we were in. And I knew that, over the years, it's like we've established a lot of relationships. We've been there. People know us. People know me. I have connections to other artists, to other companies, to other people in the industry. And like, we value that so much. And so in order to keep that continuity, in order to sort of not let those relationships and connections fade or something happen to them, it was really important that we show up again. So really a big driver was NCECA. And also it I wasn't It's not like I was working part-time and doing this on the side. This was like 100%, my life now. And so every waking second from then till now has been all about bushcraft.
That's a pretty dedicated focus. When I look at bushcraft and how you present itself now, it feels like it's this place where your creative life and your engineering life kind of have joined forces. Has it always been that way, where you've had this kind of combination of engineering and creative artistic, or has it felt separate until now?
I think it's always been there to an extent. When I was in like high school, I was taking a lot of art classes, always doing pottery, but there was a drive to go like the engineering, the business route. And so that's where I ended up going. But I think I was surprised by how much like art and creativity finds its way in to the engineering world. Just even 10 years ago, it's like I was working at a solar panel factory designing parts of solar panels. And it sounds very technical, but there was way more creative and sort of like an artistic input that was required to make that happen. Like in order to design three-dimensional objects with certain properties and shapes, that in itself is like a sculpture. It was just in a computer program for a different function. And so I think there were a lot of places that creativity started to intertwine on the engineering side. And then as time went on, as I found Diamond Core, as I started to get more into the tool product area, that's where things really started to blend a lot more, where I was using a lot more of the creative side and a lot of the engineering side together. And then I'd say bushcraft now is kind of like the peak. It's literally like the peak intersection of those two things, where it's full creative freedom. And up until this point, working at all those past companies, doing all those past projects, I felt like I was using that creative side for someone else's vision, for someone else's project or someone else's things, which is just what you do when you're working at a job.
Absolutely.
Bushcraft feels like I am using all of that creative energy for my own creative vision at the same time. And so that is like the switch that I think feels a little different.
Yeah, you've added another element to the mix of commerce and business on top of engineering and ceramics. And that's a whole new realm to learn and try to understand. But it already seems like you're doing a fantastic job at being able to promote the tools and create a product that people really enjoy using and experiencing. And all of the unboxings and the use cases that I've seen are really, I haven't heard a negative word. And so I just want to commend you on creating a tool and a product so quickly that is based out of like everything that you've done so far, like this culmination to this point, and then creating something in a relatively quick timeline that really resonates in a strong way with potters. That's
Thanks.
huge.
And that means a lot. And I've seen the same videos, and every time watching those videos, it's always a little scary. You're like, oh man, like this person has this thing I created, like, like what's going to happen? But every time, like, really been shocked by just how much people love the tools. And, when you create something and you put everything into it and you make like the best possible product you can make, and then you hand it off, like you don't know what's going to happen. But to have people sort of comment or receive the features of the tool and what that tool is meant to be, have people like understand it and really feel it, like that means a lot. And it doesn't really get old to watch people, pick it up for the first time and like notice the little things that we put a lot of effort into.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I want to get into, and this is where I'm kind of pausing. I want to get into the story of bushcraft and where you're at today, but I feel like there's steps before bushcraft, and we've kind of jumped straight in. But I want to know, like, how did you get into pottery? And I'm sure people who are interested in hearing your story, like that's such a huge element of where you're at today is clay. So how did that introduce itself to you?
Yeah, no, and it is big. And I think, well, it's important with bushcraft, just to touch on that too, is that I think it's just a unique intersection because I have this passion for pottery. I've always done pottery. And, I think my first class was in middle school. It was like one of those first classes. Nobody knows what they're doing. You make a lump on the wheel. So like that was really my first real introduction to clay. And then through high school, I took it pretty much year round. Every ceramics class. And I didn't take a lot of art classes, even though I've always drawn things. I've always liked art and drawing. I think pottery I was really sort of like drawn to that. And I did a lot of sculpture in high school. And so I actually had a piece go to NCECA, I think like my junior year in high school or something like that. It was, I shipped it to NCECA. I didn't know what NCECA was. It was just like this thing that, you send stuff to at the time. And it was like this teapot that was a conch shell with like 2 cups that were little shells. And so it was a really cool piece. And through high school, I didn't do as much on the wheel, but again, it was all like hand building. I was into like textures and sort of creating these like trees and tree bark and like these natural forms and stuff. So like really just kind of found a place with clay there. And then as I went to college, I ended up getting a job working in the studio at Cal Poly. And so it was like a student workshop, student union run studio. They had woodworking. They had a big pottery studio. I ended up working there all 4 years. And that's where I really taught a lot of wheel throwing. I got better at the wheel. That's where I really started carving on pots and sort of exploring my own pottery, like just new ways to make pottery. Yeah. And I ended up like learning a lot about teaching pottery at the same time, because we just taught a lot of classes there and like running a studio and dealing with all the studio aspects. So making glazes and like firing things, like all of that sort of happened at college, even though I wasn't going to college for pottery. I was going for, manufacturing, industrial technology. And so that I think really solidified like just my love for pottery and clay. And then then after that, as I sort of like went out into the professional world and I was working, making like solar panels and doing like a very non-artistic side, I always had a wheel in the garage. I was always making things, always finding a way to fire them. For the longest time, I was driving pots back and forth between San Luis Obispo and the Bay Area to fire in a wood kiln. And so like all those years of just like somehow sticking with it and, continuing to create things, I think led to the point where, in like 2020, that's when I found Diamond Core. And that's when I do a lot of pottery. Like I know pottery really well at this point, and I also know making tools.
That's such an interesting train of events that have woven itself into creating your story. The thing that kind of gets me though is the shift from solar production into Diamond Core. Did that open up how did that open itself up to you? Did you see an advertisement that they were hiring, or did you reach out?
No, it was literally the right place at the right time. And it was really crazy how it happened, because I wasn't necessarily in like the solar, I basically was like trying to go into any technical engineering field and landed in solar. It was a lot of fun. But then that company basically closed down the end of 2019. And so at the time, my wife now had moved to San Diego. She was becoming a nurse. And so I just like drove to San Diego. I like packed up my car one night and just like drove to San Diego. It was a very memorable drive because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was applying to all sorts of jobs down here in San Diego. There's a lot of biotech, there's a lot of packaging, there's a lot of sort of like industrial industries here. And so in my mind, I was like kind of just going to keep going that route. But I wanted to continue with pottery. So we found a local studio called Get Centered, and it was a really small studio at the time. But I ended up talking to the lady running at the time, Jen. She's amazing. She's like one of the most influential people in this journey, because I was talking to her and I'm like, hey, I like don't have a job right now, but I'll help, with your studio while I'm looking for something. And she's like, oh, there's this tool company just, close by. You should talk to them about maybe helping them out, because they don't have anyone doing engineering. They're just making tools in like this little garage. And they're called Diamond Core. I'll reach out to them. And so they weren't looking for anyone. It just so happened that like I had this engineering background. They were making some tools. I was interested in helping them. And I basically sort of agreed to give it like 6 months, because they were in a mechanic shop. Like it's a very small garage. Like there was nothing there. There's like a few people. And I'm like, all right, I'll give this is just a really cool opportunity to use some of my like professional background in combination with pottery. Like I'll just give this a shot, and I'll give it 6 months, because financially it didn't make a lot of sense. Career wise, it was like a total risk to sort of like leave my current path and go on this. But I'll just give that a shot. And it ended up turning into what we all know now as Diamond Core 6 years later. So that's like the long story of like how it actually started.
Well, I was going to say that I feel like there's so much more that you could be said there. I was going to ask how you felt going into a new city without a ton of uh, support system, and then jumping into kind of a risky job, because I've been there coming
Yeah.
into the start of a ceramic startup for the love of the passion and stay in the industry. And you're right, it is terrifying to leave what feels stable for what you love but feels scary.
Yeah. No, it's exactly that. And it was, it's sort of like a small version of, making the switch to bushcraft, but it's the same philosophy of like, you're leaving a lot of security, you're leaving like a stable sort of career path at the time. The career path I was in it was great. It was like, it looks good. It's really stable, safe, secure, comfortable. And it's like, okay, now I'm switching to this very insecure, unstable, unknown, risky. Like it was a big risk, but at the time, like the reason I made it is because like that's the time to make a risk. Like there's plenty of time to sort of recuperate. If it didn't go well, if it didn't work out, and I spent 6 months working there and it didn't pan out, then I could always switch back. Like there was plenty of time. And so I think when you're trying to weigh like risk to payoff, I was in a place where I could take that risk and sort of spend time to just give it a shot. But it was tough because it's like for the longest time, I didn't have the compensation was less than half of what I was, used to, if that matters.
Yeah.
And that's a big factor. The, health insurance, you got to figure that out. You got to figure out a lot of these things that you don't get with a stable career. All the while you're trying to create this thing from scratch in a lot of ways. Like there was sort of a backbone there. There was a foundation. The brand was there, but there were no tools. And so when I started, there were like 12 carving tools. It was like the P1 through the P12. And that was it. And there was a handful of diamond products. And so the first product or the first thing I worked on, I was like, you guys need trimming tools. Like you got carving, that's cool, but trimming's a really big part of pottery. And like, and Sika was coming up at the time. And so we need trimming tools. And so that's kind of the first set of tools that I worked on. And in that process, and I've talked about this a little bit before of like, I had to come up with a design philosophy for Diamond Core. Like they had a few tools. It was very, basic, and they weren't necessarily like manufactured in a way that could support any amount of volume. Like they were selling, we were just selling like a few at a time, literally handmade in like a garage. And the first trimming tools, that was also right when COVID hit. So I was actually working at home. There were only a few of us at the company at the time, like 3 or 4. And so the first batch of trimming tools I ended up making in my garage during COVID. And so like the first 1,000, maybe, I don't know, more than that, I was like on the weekend, like at home sanding things and like bending pieces of metal and stuff just in the backyard, trying to make this company work. And again, like I wasn't the only one. There was some product there, but like we were trying to do this next big push of like, what's Diamond Core going to be in the future?
Can you describe to me, use the word, was it design philosophy? Can you describe to me what that means for a company like a manufacturing company that produces things like trimming tools?
Yeah, it was very much, it's like if you looked at the tools, like if you looked at sort of the essence of what the P1 is, or like I walked into this shop and it's like, okay, I'm going to make trimming tools, but that also fit the brand, this design philosophy. Or like, what is the design philosophy? And so a lot of it was like a wood handle. You have that hardware. You have this blade kind of bolted on. It's a look, but it's also a function. What does that look like? How does that function? Like you can unbolt the blade. It's made of this type of wood. It's made of this type of metal. The hardware looks like this. So defining all of those things, that was sort of the design philosophy. And then how do we make more tools? How do we build like a machine to design more tools going forward that all fit within those little restraints? So like, yeah, wood handle, square wood handle, there's not round wood handles. So the square handle was something that like I really leaned into because it was different. And you see a lot of round handles, but you don't see a lot of square handles. And they sort of allow you to like pivot it or hold it and turn it a certain way. So those were all like little aspects that I just sort of saw as like, okay, let's sort of like focus on those aspects and design a series of tools that fit within that philosophy.
Got it. Thanks for clearing and explaining through what that means for a tool company like Diamond Core. What does being close to a company or a brand like Diamond Core teach you about pottery or the ceramic industry that you probably wouldn't like ever know from the outside?
There's a lot that goes into building a brand. In general, like from the outside, it looks like you go on the website and you buy tools and they show up at your door. There's a lot that goes into like the back end of that when it comes to sourcing parts, suppliers, manufacturing, like building a whole supply chain, and not just like a way to make a tool, but a way to make thousands of that tool, tens of thousands of that tool. It's so different than it's so different than pottery. It's so much in the manufacturing and engineering world. But that's what I find really interesting, is making 1,000 of something or tens of thousands of something. And that's where you're not spending a lot of time on one tool. You're looking at the kind of the data of like 1,000 tools at a time, and that's driving your decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like the matter of scale is such a huge, just a next level way of thinking, from taking something that's, I mean, most potters we're handmade. Like, how do I make this piece? But in an instance like that, how do I make 1,000 pieces?
How do you make 1,000 and 10,000? And all of a sudden, like those products, and I've tried to explain this before, where like that one single tool just becomes a statistic. And like, of course, you want to make every tool perfect. You want every tool to go to a customer and them to love it and it works perfectly. But even like, let's just say 1 out of 1,000 tools doesn't work perfectly, or you just don't put it on right, or there's like a scratch in the handle or something like that. Like 1 in 1,000 is a pretty realistic possibility when you're talking about making things in a garage and making things, as you're scaling a business. But by the time you ship, 10,000 tools, 30,000 tools, that's happening more and more. And so trying to some customer out there is going to end up with that 1 in 1,000 tools that's not perfect. And you got to find a way to deal with that, find a way to improve it. Maybe you can make it 1 in 2,000 or 1 in 5,000. And so those are kind of the problems that you don't necessarily see just looking from like the customer perspective, going to buy a tool.
No, that's fair. And then you've got customer service and then communication systems between teams. It can be a whole thing. Now, we wouldn't be having this conversation in this same way if you were still at Diamond Core. And I know that there's this natural curiosity for, I don't know, myself, and I'm sure other potters or people in the ceramics industry, to know, how did Buschcraft come into being, and what prompted the leave from Diamond Core to start your own vision?
Yeah, no, that's where it gets interesting. That's like it's like a long story, is like, putting it simple, but it did come about for a reason. And like, so I was there for almost 6 years, like 5.5 years. And it kind of all started around this time. We're at NCECA of like 2025. And that was when, at least from my perspective, in the world that I was in with the players, or the individuals in the Diamond Core world, that's when a lot of the discussion of the sale of the business started to come up. And so through that time, I had gotten to know the owners really well. There were kind of like a handful of people, I would say, in the management of Diamond Core. And so when the discussion of the sale of the business came up, I was involved in that in a number of ways. And I had a couple opportunities to sort of move forward with that, I would say, to possibly even acquire it. And it happened like a couple times, I would say, in a couple different ways. And kind of going through that process involved asking myself a lot of difficult questions, like, what am I doing with my life? Which is something that like we all ask ourselves at some point. But
yes,
it really, like, I had to like seriously ask myself that, like, what am I doing? Is this a company that I see myself being at for not like the next few years, but like the measurement becomes like in decades, which is just a much bigger thing to sort of comprehend. And so during that time, during that process, I sort of had to evaluate, like, what am I doing with my life? What's my plan for the next few decades? And how would, acquiring a company like Diamond Core fit into that plan? What's involved? It's relooking at like risk and financial risk, life risk, mental risk, and like how do you take on a Diamond Core had grown into a sizable business, still small in like the grand scheme of things, but like a sizable company. And I put so much into it. Like by that time, everything that you saw that was Diamond Core, like all the new tools, all the live streams, the education, the content, like meeting customers, meeting people. I put so much into that. And then what you didn't see was like the production, the manufacturing, the supply chain that like, I was just so integrated at the time. And so I was like, oh man, is this something that I want to continue with? And that's a difficult question to answer. Like that was tough. And so in evaluating that, and I had a lot of like friends and family and advisors and experts all looking at different parts of that equation. And so, you can evaluate just the financial aspect of it, and you're basically going to commit all of your financial resources into this project. Mm-hmm. Everything that you have and don't have and could have, you're going to commit to this thing. And then all of like your family resources. So like my wife and I and like our families, this is all going to become like a thing. You're committing that. And also just your time and your energy. And like, I'd already committed a lot of that time and energy, but like now you're facing a decision to do more of that. And so that point was really important to like think about. And I was a little bit at a crossroad of like, do I continue this or do I not? And there's more to the story whereas in like, there were a couple opportunities to sort of get into that purchasing of the business. And one of them like did not pan out in a constructive way, I would say. I don't really know how to say that without like getting too blunt about it, but like there are other people involved and it gets really complicated. And basically then there was a phase one that didn't work out. It was not going to work out. And I think if you're going to go into business with someone, you need to be able to trust the other person. And if that trust and relationship is not there equally, then it's not going to work. And so then I was basically just, talking to the owners directly to acquire the business. And I looked at all those decisions. I looked at all like that whole big picture, and it simply wasn't worth it. What Diamond Core was, what it had become, knowing everything about it, like it just was not the right decision for me. So I pretty much backed out. I walked away. But I also walked away knowing that like this transaction was still going to take, and it was not somewhere that I wanted to continue to put my time and energy into. And knowing that I had kind of come to a point where I was like ready to put time and energy into something, like I was ready to take that leap, but I made a decision that it wasn't going to be Diamond Core. So what was it going to be? And so finally we arrived at the place where, the business sold. There was a change in ownership. It was pretty clear to me that like my career at Diamond Core was not going to align with my goals financially, morally, everything. And so that's when I basically resigned 3 weeks after that. And so that was the cutover.
Man, what a crucible to like
it's kind of wild. It was a lot. And I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot, obviously, more to that story. There's just a lot of discussion, but like in a nutshell, that's sort of the decision point that switched into. And I didn't necessarily know what Buschcraft was going to be when I left. It was like, I'm just going to start something else and put everything I have into that.
If I could have your attention for just 30 seconds, I want to share something really exciting for all you pottery people out there. Madam House Studios is getting ready to launch an incredible Clay Foundations Masterclass course this summer. So whether you're looking to gain confidence in clay, seeking to supplement, or even replace a university-level ceramics class, this is for you. With over 35 cinematic masterclass level pottery lessons, this course is designed to elevate your world of ceramics and help save years of trying to piece together all that information and talents on your own. We're going to be offering some introductory rates for our first students, so don't miss out. Visit MathemHouseStudios.com today to join the waitlist and be alerted when Clay Foundations goes live. We're really excited to have you here. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the episode.
Man, so there's been several different instances in your life where you've made pretty risky, what other people would call risk decisions would be. How did it feel to be in that situation of leaving, once again, certainty for uncertainty?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't wish it on anyone because it's not fun. It's really scary. It's really not enjoyable in a lot of ways, but there's for as much as it's not enjoyable, there's a lot of fulfillment and there's a lot of excitement that comes with it. And so it's truly a combination of the scariest, the most scared you've ever been combined with the most excited you've ever been combined. You're feeling physically, you're feeling those feelings, but you don't, one minute it could be scared, one minute it could be excited, and they're just sort of intermixed. And so I think from I had that experience of sort of taking that risk and seeing that it could work out. And when I took that risk the second time, I knew I could do it. I knew all the parts, I knew all the pieces, I knew kind of mechanically what to do and what had to happen, but there was a lot of doubt of will it work, or could I create a product that people would buy? Can I make enough money to support a family? Can I make this work? And that part, there's nothing you can do about that. That's just scary. That's just kind of be hard.
Yeah, eventually you're just gonna have to jump and trust that you can do it. And what's fascinating is most of the time you can. Most of the time, it's within us to be able to reach at least the part of our goals that'll support us if we put all of ourselves into it.
No, and it helps to have people around you, everyone around me, everyone, friends, family, everyone was kind of pushing me to that point, and encouraging me. And then finally, one day my wife was just you got to rip the Band-Aid off. You gotta get out of there. You just gotta do it. You got to do it. And so that's when I sort of just jumped into it. And when you make that risk, it's going to be okay. Cause we're pretty good at figuring things out. And when you're in that moment, you're just going to do what you need to do, but it's tough. It's a tough decision to make.
It is. And nobody can make it but you.
Exactly.
Well, what part of Buschcraft then was this conviction of I want to do something, I know I need to do something, but also the other part had to be some kind of either question of what could be better or what doesn't exist. So what prompted you to jump into the products and the tools that you initially started making?
Yeah. So the kind of right when I left and I started, and I didn't plan on going in, continuing with pottery. I wanted to make a product. I didn't know what. I looked a lot into outdoor products, everyday carry products and things, because I enjoy that too. I like little gadgets and little things, and because at first I was I want to get as far away from Diamond Core as possible, but then it's oh man, my whole circle, my whole network, our whole life revolved around pottery, and I can't do that as much as I try. Maybe one day down the road, I think it'd be really fun to sort of expand and build Buschcraft into a much bigger brand than what it is. But it wasn't long after I left that I was I got to do pottery tools. And I had a lot of tool ideas from even before I worked at Diamond Core, from college, when I was literally making hacksaw blades and carving with every little scrap of metal, all those tools those original tools that we all use in pottery studios. I had a lot of ideas from then. And again, this whole knowledge of the industry and people and all the things people have said to me. So I was well, I gotta do that, but I want to base it in sort of these simple tools, nothing crazy, nothing overly fancy or sophisticated. What's the new design philosophy for Buschcraft? I knew how to make them. I knew how to make them, but I didn't know really what that was. And so I just had to sort of spend time thinking about what would be the tool I want to do. If I want to go and teach pottery and make pottery I need tools that I can use. So like, what am I going to use that I know will work? And how could I make the best possible tool that at least I would be happy with? And then I would feel comfortable showing and teaching with, and then maybe others would be like happy with. So that's kind of like where it started, of like, let me just make the basic tools that I know I use that I could teach with and show with.
How did you begin to shape Buschcraft's design philosophy from being separate from Diamond Cores, or anything that you've had kind of building up to that you wanted to separate from?
So like an important distinction there is like, I wanted to be as different from Diamond Core as possible for every reason, to separate the brand, to separate, legally to separate. I don't want to step on Diamond Core in any way. Like, I don't want to use any part of that philosophy or product line or like anything. So there really was like a motivation to make something so completely different in every possible way. And so that sort of drove me to like, literally, I like threw out all the tools I had. Like, I got rid of everything and just started from scratch. Like, what are we going to make? Like, if you're just approaching this problem for the first time, like, how do you make a tool that people want? And I think that allowed me to sort of look at things like, I don't want to make just like a product to sell that people will buy. Like, I want to make a tool that genuinely people want and will work really well. And so what do I value? It's like, I value that modularity. I value like a high value tool, but for an affordable price. Like, being accessible, being affordable was really important to me. So making things like simple, not complicated, and not expensive was important. And so those things sort of drove a lot of the design thinking to lead into the tool set.
Looking at some of the the design sketches, and you had a lot of hand-drawn illustrations and sketches and designs that you used to kind of craft this product line out. I was really fascinated with how much just artistry and craftsmanship went into the design process. And I love that it's included in the name Buschcraft, because I think hearing you talk and just seeing the product on the back half, it's really clear that craftsmanship's kind of at the heart of what you want to put out into the world. How would you say that craftsmanship feeds into not only the product, but what you hope the potter's experience of using the product is?
Yeah, craft was in there for a reason. Yeah, like I think I wanted like people to sort of feel it. So that drove a lot of things, like sort of the weight of the tool. And I draw a lot. I draw a lot. Like, I've drawn longer than I've done pottery, like illustrations and sketches. And so if I make something, I have to draw it first. And so I just started sketching out all sorts of ideas and shapes and things. And that's sort of how I just like process a lot of these ideas, is drawing them. And then I can kind of see what it looks like, draw another sketch, see what that looks like, draw another sketch. And then there's a point where it's like you go to actually make a prototype. But I always start with sketching things. And I always start with drawing these ideas out. And in the process of drawing that, that's sort of where the dragonfly concept came in. And I liked the idea of like a whole system of tools that would sort of fit around one handle. And as I was drawing that, like, I started to look at it, I was like, oh, it kind of looks like a dragonfly body. Like, so like in the point of like drawing it, that's where that whole concept came from.
That's cool.
But yeah, and I feel like drawing things out adds to the craftsmanship of it. I don't know. It's a tricky question, because it's like, I just wanted people to like pick up the tool and go like, oh, this is a really nice tool. Like, literally feel the value of it right away. But a big part of that also was the affordability of it. And how do you maximize value and like keep things affordable? Like, balancing those two things out is important.
What are the different elements that, like you said, you want somebody to pick up a tool and say, wow, this is a good tool? What makes that thought pop into somebody's head when they pick up a trimming tool? Like, what are the individual pieces that line up to, this is a good tool from a designer's point of view?
The materials used is one element. So materials used is one element. The function is kind of another element. So like the blade, super sharp, needs to be really sharp, really well made. And so when I started with like just on the material side, like, I wanted to get rid of wood completely, like go away from wood, just because wood doesn't, in my experience, wood doesn't last very long in a pottery studio environment. Like, we use a lot of wood. It does a good job, but it doesn't have like that durability aspect of like an all metal tool. And so I sort of chose materials that would be very easy to clean, be very durable, be very just kind of robust and long lasting. And so I think immediately when you pick up a tool, I have one here, but like you pick up a Dragonfly tool and immediately you're like, okay, this is like not going to break. Like it's a really solid piece of metal. So that's an important like material decision. And then when it comes to the blade, the function, the sharpness, like I just really wanted to prioritize those details because you pick it up, you feel it, and then you go to use it. All potters are going to notice immediately what it feels like to carve in clay or to trim clay. And we're all familiar with like the tools that we've all used. They're good tools, like all the Kemper tools that we all grew up with and know really well. Like they work really well, but we're all familiar with just that style of tool. And so you go to use a new tool, and if it's razor sharp and you feel the difference of like carving clay, you're going to notice that immediately. And so I think putting a lot of thought into the performance, like the feeling of like the blade, and when you hold the tool, how that feels too. So those are the aspects I tried to really like focus on.
I really enjoyed learning that you used pins and like X-Acto knives as inspiration for like how you crafted the blades and the handles. Is there anything else you might want to share with your hopefully potential customers about the design process of the tool itself and how it's really crafted in a way to be enjoyable to use?
Yeah, and that I did lean into a lot of pens. And again, like I've drawn a lot, so I'm very familiar with pens and like pencils and like mechanical pencils and nice pens. So I was like a big influence was like, I want this tool to feel like you have a really high quality pen or pencil. And you're really comfortable with that. Everyone's comfortable with a nice pen or pencil. Like we're used to picking it up. I want you to have that same feeling, but like on a piece of clay, on a piece of pottery. And so that, like the knurled grip, the all metal design, all those things, a lot came from mechanical pens and pencils and like instruments, drawing instruments, drafting instruments. You know, you think of like kind of old school, but like calipers and compasses and like all that just heavy duty metal, very durable, not overly complicated, just like simple, but very high quality. And so that's sort of the feeling that drove a lot of those little decisions too, was I want this to feel like a nice pen that you're going to go draw on your canvas with. And like, what does that feel like? And it's got to be adapted a little bit. But like, how can the blade itself be so small that you don't really notice like the blade? It just feels like a pen, and it's going to act like one too. So,
I love that. I have a thing for nice pens. Do you have a favorite pen?
I do. I have one here. I pull it. This is it's a Rotring 800. So I've been using this one for a few years now, and it feels really good. It's a little bit heavier. And that's where I really noticed like the weight matters, the balance matters. And so on the Dragonfly, I always liked, knurled grips on a lot of like old mechanical pencils. And so the Dragonfly has a knurled grip. Yeah, you're good.
Can you tell me what knurled grip means?
Oh, yeah, like a knurled pattern. So like that sort of grippy, it's very like a tactile feel.
Okay, understood.
So yeah, in metal, that knurled, that pointy texture is just called knurling. And so I really like that feeling. But in a lot of pens and pencils that I've had with that like texture on there, it wasn't always grippy enough. And the thing is, like in pottery, like your hands are wet, you have to have a little bit more pressure while you're carving. And so I kind of decided to make that knurled texture extra intense, like literally make it deeper. And so that's a very specific design choice to make this knurling texture grippier, more intense. So you can feel it. If you pick up like a knurled pencil and the Dragonfly, you can feel that difference. It doesn't, and it's interesting, like a lot of people don't love it right away, and I've heard from a lot of people that do love it right away. And so that's just part of, like, you can't please everyone. And so that's what sort of spurred the, like, if you don't like that texture, you can swap out the grip for anything you want. And so that's led into this idea that, like, well, if you want to make this instrument, this carving instrument, like very customizable for you, you can swap out all these pieces. And in the future, I could come out with another component or another part, and it will fit on your carving tool. So if you have a set of tools, over time, you can customize them, you can change parts, you can upgrade them, to make them fit your style. and everything will be sort of backwards compatible is the idea.
I think that's really generous to your customer base, because you're essentially creating one thing that can be multiple things down the road, especially as Bushcraft grows, where you could have taken a track of saying, I'm going to create individual things for each purpose and hopefully create a business model that sells more tools. But in this case, you're really being generous towards your customers. I think that's fantastic.
And that like goes back to just trying to be accessible. I have always wanted to. That was something that I had a problem, I guess, with DiamondCore with my time there. And I was not shy about it either. Like every tool I released, I would lowball our internal team of like, this is what I think we should charge. And then it was, no, let's add $20 to it. And it's like, that never felt right to me in a lot of ways. And I felt like that led to this big gap between like price and value that I personally saw. And so I value things that gap is like very close, where you feel like you're getting a lot of value for what you pay for, or more value for what you pay for. And that decision, it leads to a little bit slower growth. Like, yeah, I could be selling individual tools and charge more. I talked to a lot of people that told me to charge more, but I just think it leads to a better community, a better like foundation, a better brand. And that was a very like kind of conscious decision. And just the design aspect of like, this tool is not perfect the way it is. Like, it's the best tool that I can make right now, but there's going to be things in the future that are also really cool, and I want them to work on the old products. And like, I just think that's a really cool concept anyways, to have that modularity.
Ultimately, I think you're right on, especially on the brand level, that level of generosity or reciprocity in the beginning of saying, I'm going to make this thing it's really nice, and I'm going to give it to you at a price that's really, I could charge more for this, and you're getting a better value that you're paying. I think that as a customer and as a potter, I know that says a lot to me when I'm picking something off a tool. It's like, I associate more with the brand in a situation like that than rather if I were to pick something off the shelf and I know it's expensive and I'm probably paying more than I should for it. And when I think too about how DiamondCore was approached by the clay industry when they started coming out with tools, you had one camp that was super popular, but I think, into your point of a brand decision of being accessible, I think the other camp when DiamondCore was really expensive is the quote that you would hear, or the feedback we would hear. Was there, and I'm just curious from like the insider's perspective, were there reasons on the DiamondCore side that might not be evident from a consumer standing at a shelf looking at a price tag of what they would use to justify the cost?
Some things are, I'll say, like, some things are genuinely expensive to make. But
that's fair.
But not as much as you think. And like, they're very much, DiamondCore grew into a boutique luxury brand was the idea. And so just by that definition alone was sort of the reason used to charge more. I'll say that much. That you see that with a lot of brands, like a lot of these expensive brands, like the and it's got to pay for, got to for building, you got to manufacture things. But like at the same time, like I feel like the Dragonfly, personally, and I'm a little bit biased, but like personally, I think it's a higher quality tool and almost in every way. But it's and it actually like costs me a little bit more to manufacture, but I see like a lot of long-term benefit to keeping it affordable and building like the brand around a very high quality, high value. It's not cheap. Like if you look at the array of pottery tools, the Dragonfly and a lot of the Bushcraft tools are not the cheapest tools. Like they're definitely, you're going to pay for them, but I feel like the value stays up there, which is important.
And I think that's the equation that you're trying to balance, is on the after the equal sign and the customer's using it, have they paid more versus how much value are they getting through the experience and the life of the tool? And I think in your case, that equation is probably weighted more in favor of the customer, even given your history and the product itself and the quality of the materials.
Yeah, definitely. It's everyone's doing that equation anyway. When you go shopping, you're always doing that equation. And I think you see it, and like I heard a lot of the time, like I heard the other end of that equation where people saying, "Oh, I paid this much," and it's just like it's a good tool, and diamond core tools are good tools. Like I designed the vast majority of them. They're good, like they work well, but like people felt that difference between the value and the price, and like I don't like hearing that. I don't like it wasn't fun to hear, and so I'd much rather hear people say, "Oh, I paid for this and I got the full value out of it," or even more.
That's nice, especially when your name's in the title of the company.
That matters. I take it really personally, so I don't like that.
I'm curious now too to talk about kind of your experience at NCECA and to hear from your perspective as like a first-time exhibitor. I guess a couple of different angles. One, I'll start here. What was it like to go to NCECA and present a trimming tool alongside or in the same conference hall as Diamond Core? Was there any like awkwardness? How has that played out as you are being more public with Buschcraft?
Yeah, it was interesting, but not as awkward as you might think, because I think since the day I left, I've just been really conscious to focus on the new brand, the new tool, and sort of the positivity of that, the positivity of the future, the new community that we're building, and try to just like move on from that. And I think that energy really like was there at NCECA. And so, I mean, we had a big booth. We had a really good presence. My wife and I were both there. Both of our families were there. Our friends were there. And like, you could walk by the booth and I think you could just feel that sort of positive energy of like everyone there. We were having a really fun time. Like it was a lot of fun. Like it was, people would come back to the booth just to hang out and talk. And that's kind of all we wanted to do. Also, like, of course, we're selling tools. Of course, we're demoing tools. That's important. But like meeting people, talking to people, I think that's what everyone felt. And everyone, at least on our booth side, was having such a fun time being there that I think that creates like a little bubble of energy that is noticeable when you're walking by.
That's a good observation. I would definitely agree with that, because I think every time I walked past your booth, it was something happening, an enjoyable moment, and I don't know. It just there was an attraction of like, I want to see there's Buschcraft and stuff.
It's something going on there.
How important was being at NCECA to like launching Buschcraft officially?
But really important, I would say, and it's tough. It's not easy. It's like launching Buschcraft, and then on top of that, going like planning for NCECA at the scale that we went was really difficult. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of work. That is really tough, and that it's very expensive. It's very time consuming. It's just a lot. And so is it worth it? I would say yes, because we showed up and we kind of did two things. Like we sold product. That always helps to sort of pay off just the financial equation of NCECA. But more importantly, there's connections that we made with new distributors, with other manufacturers, new friendships, a lot of customer connection, a lot of just sort of relationships cultivated. And that matters so much, because then everyone goes to NCECA and they see this new brand, and it's like, oh, they may have seen something online. They may have like seen a reel, but then they go there and now it's like, oh, that's a real brand. Like it feels real. And so I think that is really important, to sort of show up and be a player in the industry. And it also shows, other brands and other companies, not just Diamond Core, saw like, okay, like this is a legit brand. Like we may have heard something, but now they see us there and we're like, hey, we're like, we mean business. Like we're here for the long run. That I think is important. And that's like, it's not a very quantifiable like metric to go look at NCECA, but it's there. Like you very much feel it.
I've definitely done the math to figure out, is it worth it for vendors to attend NCECA? And I think you're right. In the non-visual math equations, like the unspoken variables that come out of it, it probably would definitely be worthwhile. I've considered getting a booth myself for Matham House as we launch, and I think we'll end up doing it. It's been just an interesting kind of observation. It feels like a new brand showing up at NCECA is kind of like elbowing their way into the room and say like, okay, we're here, and all right, take us seriously.
You do. But it's like, if you just elbow in a little spot, you're there, like you are there, and people see you, and that's important. You're part of the lineup. And yeah, I think the financial part, like if you're purely looking at dollars, it's a much more difficult equation to solve. But I think if you kind of convert all these other things into a dollar value in the future for like the next year's worth of that brand, like it makes a lot of sense.
There's some wisdom in that.
That's my perspective.
I think you're probably right. For the future of bushcraft, as you're already planning out, I'm sure this next year, we've got the Dragonfly. We've talked a little bit about that tool and that modular system. What's coming out that's either fresh or new or kind of like just on the horizon?
So a lot of the just on the horizon are sort of bits and pieces expanding on those two systems. And so my idea with the Dragonfly and the Forge, where like you have a very like light, delicate precision duty on like the Dragonfly, you have a very heavy duty like lifting on the Forge. And so I want both of those systems to carry like a long ways. And so I see a lot more coming in terms of new blades, new tips, new inserts for the Forge, new tips for the Dragonfly that sort of take their capability into a lot of new areas. And so far, we only have like 5 little detail blades for the Forge. There's the tungsten blades. Those are important. There's more trimming blades that I want to work on this year. Next up, in the next like month, my goal is to come out with another 5 detail blades. And a lot of those shapes come from just feedback I've heard from customers and what people want. So it's sort of expanding that. There's some larger, we're going to call the arc carving blades, which will make deeper grooves, like more traditional carving. And so that's all going to come to the Dragonfly. There's other little, I'm looking into some more like diamond sgraffito tips that I've gotten a lot of requests for that. And so I want to expand on that. But again, I want to fit everything to that Dragonfly. So if you have it already, you can just expand it. And there's plenty of people out there that want one tool. They don't want to switch tips. They can afford to buy one tool for everything. You can still do that. So that's where it's like, it works for someone who gets one tool and 20 tips, or someone who wants to buy all 20 tools. It will work for you that way. But there's a lot there coming in terms of expanding. Like everyone has a little niche idea, a little detail they want to carve, and I'm trying to come up with a tool, a tip just for that.
That's really exciting. And it's getting me even more excited for all the things that you're going to come out with, because the Dragonfly and the Forge, I don't own a Forge yet, but I did get to try one at NCECA, and just this year, I mean, that thing is so sharp.
It's razor sharp. You got to be careful. It is, yeah. And then on that note, like impressive. I was literally like, I want to make this like, if you take like an X-Acto blade, like razor sharp, but you just make that into a trimming tool, like combine that with like the homemade hacksaw blade idea. That's the Forge. And it turned out razor sharp. I was really kind of shocked as I was like progressing these prototypes and like working with suppliers to get the blade done. When that final prototype, when I felt it, how sharp it was, I was like, okay, this is it. But it's kind of ridiculous, but it works really well. So
no, I'm so thankful, because that's been the thing that I've wanted as in a trimming tool for so long. It's just like exact sharpness, but also like a heavy duty. I'm not trimming with an X-Acto blade, but something that has some heft behind it.
It is. There's a lot of heft.
I think it's just so cool that there's systems, and it's not just a single tool, but like this handle, this clasp are going to support the different trimming tools that you create in the future.
No, and on the Forge too, it's like those handles were meant to fit. So I see I'm looking into like a series of like knives, pottery knives that fit in the Forge handle, needle tools, scoring tools. They fit on, and I'll grab this really quick, but they fit on the like our metal ribs. So the Forge handle fits on metal ribs. And so that was like something where I wanted everything to be interchangeable. Everything just like fits. And we don't necessarily advertise this, but if you have a metal rib and you have a Forge handle and you start like looking at it, all the metal ribs have their grip slot, which is what you hold with. That all will fit.
That's so much better than the little hole in the middle.
Yeah, and it is, because you can shift your grip. So if you're holding here or down here, you can move around. So like I sort of thought of it that way. I was like, oh, we might as well make it the same size as the Forge. So the idea is it's a better grip. Now we can make all sorts of things that fit the Forge handle, not just the Forge blade. So there's a lot of blades that people have been requesting for the Forge, and tiny little adjustments. And so I want to do it all. It all takes time and resource. So we'll get there. It just like, it's not going to happen overnight. And the other thing on the the forge I'll share that's cool is these handles, you can bend them and they'll stay, right? So
no way.
The idea is on a metal rib to basically, I like these rigid metal ribs, but if you make it thinner to where it's flexible, then you can actually bend it, but it'll stay in that shape. So you can kind of like shape and form your own shapes. So that's on the horizon. That's, again, there's a lot to do. So we'll get there.
I know people are perpetually in the bad habit of thinking that everything that could exist already exists. And then we see something that's truly unique and really cool. And then we're like, whoa, and it blows your mind. Yeah. And I feel like that's what your tools are bringing to the pottery community.
I'm trying. No, and thanks. That means a lot, because I want to bring that new, but I also want to just embrace like I think the forge does a good example of like, if you've ever made like a hacksaw trimming tool, which a lot of people have, and like those were some of my first tools I made. Like, it's not an unfamiliar concept, like that style of tool, but the forge just brings like a really fresh sort of modern twist on it. But its core, it's a very simple bent piece of metal that's really sharp. Like, that's it. But there's a lot else to it, obviously. Yeah.
It's like you're not reinventing the wheel, but it's reinvented enough that it's good.
Yeah. No, it's trying to balance that out a little bit. So
yeah. Well, if Buschcraft, we fast forward, we throw a stone out 10 years and Buschcraft is succeeding at its deepest level for the vision that you have right now. What does that look like for you, for the potters who are using your tools, or the clay community as a whole?
Oh man, yeah, it's hard. Like there's high hopes for Buschcraft. What that means for the pottery community, I'd like to see the tool side, Buschcraft be a very influential tool for new potters and existing potters. I would really like to see it encourage new potters to like try new things and to continue with pottery, because they have a really nice, cool tool that they can use. With existing potters, I would like to see it encourage them to like perfect their skill even more, or try new things as well. And like, don't want to be limited to just like professionals or just like experienced potters. I don't really want to be limited to that. Like, I really think it's important to sort of get new people into pottery, not just for like the sake of the industry and but also just to encourage people to try it. And so I think I would like to get Buschcraft to the point where it can sponsor more and more individuals and school and education. And that is just like an important part to us, like my wife and I, in like sponsoring that, but just encouraging that and like helping foster new creative communities and people. So like, that's important. That takes a lot of, effort and money in itself. And so it's like, I want Buschcraft to be successful enough to be able to do that on the side. And then, that would kind of make it able for like me to go around and us to go around and visit studios and visit potters and like teach workshops. And I love teaching workshops and love talking to new people and seeing new studios all over. So I think it'd be really cool to be successful enough to where we can go do that. We can go meet new people and new places, and like anywhere you go in the world, there's a pottery studio not that far away.
That's true.
I'm realizing, like, somewhere, even if it's a little hole in the wall or in a school or like in someone's house, like you can find pottery just about anywhere you go. And so I think it'd be awesome to go discover a lot of that and just meet all those people wherever they are.
Sometimes I feel like it's hard to balance like craftsmanship or arts life with the life that like ambition that you have to start a business. And then what we do with the fruits of that ambition. It sounds like you have a pretty good plan, but what would you say to somebody else who is wrestling with feeling like really ambitious callings to do something like start a business, and then also wrestling with but I want to make it affordable. I want to create, not just produce.
Yeah, you got to try it. It's tough. I think you have to be ready to make decisions that will knowingly slow you down to a point. Like, you have to be willing to accept a little bit slower growth, especially in today's world where everything's about like growing as fast, as quickly, as big as possible. There's a lot of like marketing strategies and formulas for that. And we're kind of consciously not choosing those in a lot of ways. And so I think you have to be ready to you do have to give up some things. You have to give up some of that speed. But again, we're here with the perspective of it's going to take a long time. And like, if you have this ambitious idea, you can't expect it to happen overnight. Like, you really do have to sort of sign up for a long haul. And I think anyone looking to start a business or looking to like create their ambitious idea, like, they know it's going to be a long haul. And like, just as what with you're doing, like, you're not looking at it this year, you're looking at it 10 years, 20 years down the road. Like, that's just the perspective that you have to have. But I think it's important to just stay kind of true to the original values and the original goals that you have. And, you know, you might, if you want to grow something really important and stuff, it's just going to take that much time, and you got to be okay with a little bit of a slow burn.
Yeah, that slow burn's a real thing.
It's a real thing. I've
always been impressed by how long anything good takes to do. It's like, I'm going to have an idea. Ideas are quick, but execution, well done execution takes a long time.
It does. Yeah, it really does.
Well, Nikolai, is there anything that we haven't discussed so far that you would love to be able to share with somebody that hopefully is going to find a bushcraft tool in their future, and when they pick it up, you want them to remember one or two things? Is there anything that you want to share with people?
Yeah, I mean, not like specifically, but just that if you pick it up and there's an idea you have or something, like, I think, one, we want to be really approachable. So like, you can tell me your idea. You can tell, like, I love talking about tools and new things with people. And so I think a lot of these, now that we have this foundation, a lot of what I want to do in the future is going to come from what people want to use and see. And so, you know, being able to say, hey, I have this really unique problem in my pottery, or like this little scenario, I carved this one little spot and I can't get into this corner a certain way. Like, I think that's the most interesting part that I would want to hear from someone, is like, what are these little areas that like a tool doesn't exist and you need it to do this one specific thing. And I think there's other people that would find that useful. So that's one part, is like, just, you know, we're all like, the goal of this is to come out with new things and always be sort of evolving and changing. So nothing's set in stone. And then, yeah, a big part of this is just to encourage you to play, you as the customer, to play with new shapes and try new things. Like, it's the whole point of like getting a tool with a bunch of different blades is to go try those different blades and just see what they do, and not, you know, you don't know what you're going to make until you might try a new shape or new something that you've never used, but you try it and you just think, oh, this is cool. Like, now I have a new idea. So I think trying new things, experimenting with new parts of pottery and new tools is really important too. That's what will kind of carry your work. And it carries my work. Like, I try a new shape and it opens up a whole new door of carving just based off like one blade shape. So not be afraid to explore that.
If somebody wanted to find bushcraft, where can they go to either see some examples of your work, find the tools, or even buy them?
So everything's at buschcraft.shop. And bushcraft is spelled, so it's BUSCH, craft with a K, that's important, .shop. And that's all the, I have work there. Pottery's there, all the tools are there, and then of course we're working on adding more videos and content like that. And then Buschcraft Studio is Instagram, and Buschcraft Studio on TikTok as well. So you can go see all the videos, all the content there. We're always trying to make more stuff.
Fantastic. Well, Nikolai, thank you so much for sharing your story about how you've come from engineering in school and built a career for yourself, and hopefully are starting something that's going to add a lot of value to the potters and the ceramic industry as a whole. So I just want to say a big thanks, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm excited to see what's coming up next.
No, thank you. And this was a lot of fun. So it's good to talk about all these things, and thanks for the opportunity to share it and share a little bit of the story.